how do we even start? Because this is going to be huge.
You mean, what do we do with the whole issue, or what do we do?
Where do we start? Because we are so
Well, you know
far
what?
divided right now
I,
into two camps.
I have another book coming out, and I have a significant chapter in there, and it deals with immigration, and I'd probably be the first one to admit that it's not going to satisfy everybody, because
No,
as
it
you
won't.
indicate,
No, neither
it
side
is
will
a
be
very,
totally
very
satisfied.
tough issue, because, you know, if you can't deal with it because of our conditions. A welfare state has a different attitude toward immigrants than a free market society. You know, if we had free markets, we probably would have a very generous work program.
Right.
And, you know, over the years in my district, and I'm in Texas, and we have the same similar problem. But over the years, I had as many people come to me wanting to find some good workers. You know, they couldn't get the workers that they needed, whether it was in construction or farming or shrimping and all these things. Please let these people come in to work. At the same sense, on the other one is the borders are open, they flow in, they're illegal. The federal government says you have to educate them and take care of them and bankrupt your state. So it is really overwhelming. So I talk a lot about how important the free market is, how important it is to enforce the laws on the border, how important it is to get rid of all the subsidies, but also I conclude the chapter by a warning that don't get careless on how you think you can solve this problem. Because if it's control and ID cards and all things, they have already.
That's what we faced in Arizona.
That's already what our government, our federal government, is doing. I mean, to go in and out of our country, it used to be. I lived in Detroit, and I've lived in Texas, and I was used to going back and forth across borders, and it was a non-event. But now you got to have passports, and with the economy going to the dogs, they're going to have capital controls, which means they're going to have stricter controls of sending money out and you going out and carrying a suitcase with gold coins in. I mean, they are going to crack down on everything. Every time they want to really crack down and control people, those things can be turned against us. So it's a good way for the statists to use a hot button issue, and a lot of people will say, yes, you got to do it. You got to do it. We got to get those illegals. So
Thank you.
It's not an easy issue.
Has there been any talk that you know of about suspicionless inland border checkpoints? Like here in Arizona, they have checkpoints up to 95 miles away from Mexico. They just check everybody.
See, I think you're making the point. That's coming, and
And
for you
internal
to facilitate it,
passports.
they're going to have to give you a national ID card, which prove yourself and carry your papers. Then you go interstate, the whole works. So, no, I've heard about that.
That sounds
I
like
knew
good
they were
stuff.
here. They're in Texas too.
Absolutely.
And when they were talking about that, I guess they're still talking about that NAFTA-type highway running from Mexico to Canada. That's those kind of things that they're going to be, issuing. They'll be checking you all along. It'll be every one of us. In that highway, you couldn't even get across the highway. You probably have to be checked to go across. No getting on Route 10 and driving to Texas.
Does it seem then that even though the Tea Party movement, certainly your involvement since way back to 1988, does it seem though the bureaucrats that are involved in these various federal bureaucracies just keep moving us, closer to a controlled economy? Even though all of these things are in the media, are they still pushing towards further restrictions and regulations?
They are, but where we're winning is just like no matter how much power the Fed has, when their money quits, they'll have to do something about it. But there is such a thing as de facto nullification, and understand that they overissue citations and issue citations because they saw you on camera. Most people don't send in a check. They just say, in California now, if they arrest everybody that smoked marijuana, they bankrupt some cities and it arrests 2 million people. So they tell the feds, forget it. So it's nullification, but I think there's going to be more of that. This is good stuff on the medical thing. I'm always pessimistic about the courts, but maybe we'll get something good from the courts, at the Supreme Court level, and say, you can't make people do it. But just think about it, though. That'd be very good if we win that. And say, you can't force people to buy insurance. But philosophically, is that a lot different than you paying Medicare taxes? You're forced into that, too. And, you may or may not ever use it, but you you are forced to pay. That philosophically, to me, is the same thing that we have been, forced into a lot of things that we should. Now, I think we ought to, in a free country, have the right to opt out of the whole system. The important thing is, if we developed a libertarian society, a free society, but there were a small group, 20% said, we like socialism. The 80% of us would say, you're welcome to your socialism, don't impose it on us, would we?
Right.
But if you have socialism come in, and there's 20% of us that want to opt out, no way. They need us, they have to milk us, and we become the supporters of their massive costs.
To the Federal Reserve, do you think it's possible an application amending the Federal Reserve might ever be a free choice in currency, or not having capital gains tax on precious metals and stuff like that? Would that
It's possible, but it might be just, tomorrow this thing just blows up and oil's $400 a barrel and prices are skyrocketing. People who are going to have silver coins aren't going to, and gold coins aren't going to worry about taxes. I mean, it would be survival, but it wouldn't be a very nice society. But I work on the assumption that we could legalize it. If that were legal, we don't have to close down the Fed.
We know we had
We
competition.
would have a system where we wouldn't be paying taxes and we could use it.
Yeah.
And why should they have monopoly control over it? They shouldn't have monopoly control over education. We still, fortunately, can have homeschooling and private schooling, and that helps us. But, go ahead.
My question was sort of in that vein, speaking sort of philosophically, because I was interested in what you thought about the intellectual leadership that we have here in America. Because we have lots of political leaders, and we have lots of people who, like yourself, who will show different ideas and things like that. But there's really no public figures that speak on intellectual issues. I mean, if someone's interested in academia, or they go through college and they're interested in that sort of thing, so naturally they'll follow those tendencies. But for the general public, it's all, for lack of a better term, Biggest Loser, or things like that. It's all these different, reality TV shows and things like that. There's really no interest in, intellectual issues. I think that's a lot of the problem that we see
But
here.
I don't think you'll change. I think the majority of people are going to always be going to the, going to the circus. And
Sure.
But I think that places like the Mises Institute offers
Definitely.
alternatives to it, and there's always been somebody like that. When I was looking for the answers in the 50s and the 60s, there was only one or two groups. The one I came across was a Leonard Read's group.
There you go.
Leonard Read had something, and he was by himself essentially, just a lonely guy that did it, was able to do it. He kept that thing going all those years, and a lot of people left that and started other groups, and it has an effect. So they're never going to be on TV. I think it's amazing that we're getting on Fox TV and we're having a Judge Napolitano on there and Stossel. I mean, that is spreading ideas. So
If I might say, I voted for you in 1988, and I've had people since that time say, name one person, these conversations, name one person, I say, well, Dr. Ron Paul, well, who's that? They know now. So there's progress being made, and more people...
slow and
In his 1964 speech at the Republican National Convention, Barry Goldwater talked about the concentration of private power. And when I see Google and Verizon writing these net neutrality bills and they can't get it passed in Congress, so then they foist it on the FCC, how do we keep them from writing these regulations to hurt their competitors and make almost like a corporatist fascist state? You know what I'm saying?
how the corporations control the
Yes.
regulations.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's an educational thing, and it is true. I learned that lesson when I first went to Congress in '76. There were some regulations on drug companies, and I thought, well, the drug companies would come in and they'd talk, and I thought, boy, I don't want any of these regulations. I'm against the FDA and all this stuff. And they were against me. They wanted that because it was the small companies that couldn't compete. The research and the legal departments and all that. No, that's it must be part of human nature. It's once again trying to strive for a society that understands that it's not legal, it's not part of the Constitution, and we shouldn't put up with it. But I guess there's always been encouragements forever and ever. But then again, this whole idea of protecting liberty the way our Constitution did, that was a pretty new experiment. So if you look at all of history and all the world, probably 98% of everybody ever lived under tyrants. But now what we're seeing and witnessing is that looks like we'll have a tyrant, even if it's an elected tyrant. Yes. And that's why, but that's why I feel good that people are starting to wake up, but I still think there's lots of education work to do. Education is probably more important than politicians.
Yes.
I think it's April the 19th that your new book comes out.
That
Release.
sounds close.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? You mentioned there's a big chapter on immigration, but some of the...
Well, it's called Liberty Defined, and goes over a lot of issues like that. One issue that's a hot button issue right now is the marriage issue. You know, and I think it seems so easy for me. That's probably why it's not right, because it's so easy. They can't say it's that easy. But why is government involved in marriage? You know, I don't care what people call themselves, and if they don't impose their description on me and I won't impose it on them, and I don't want the federal government involved. So I spend time on things like that. I do another one I did even before this union problem broke out. I have a chapter on unions. And I went back recently and I've been rereading some of the Austrian economists like Mises and Hayek, and boy, they come down really hard on unions. And I always wanted not to do that because, you know, our movement should be, you know, populist oriented, help the average guy and all. But unions can be very devastating. So I have a whole chapter on unions, but I talk a little bit in that about how my first experience with a union was when I was probably in high school, and my dad had a small dairy. We had 20 trucks, and they were non-union. And the big companies, that's when, the old days when we delivered milk to houses. And the big companies all went on strike. And that day, my dad didn't send the trucks out. I thought, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you sending those trucks out? He says, if we do, they'll destroy them. They'll burn them or turn them over and destroy the property. And boy, I remembered that for a long time, you know. What right do they have to do this, you know? So that was my introduction to the union violence.
Labor groups are coming.
But the simple answer there is people have a right to organize. But in a free society, you always have voluntary contract. They have the right to organize, offer their service in a collective fashion. If I'm the businessman, I have the right to reject it. It has to be a voluntary arrangement. So volunteerism solves social problems and economic problems and various subjects like that. There are 50 of them.
Folks, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. We have 5 to 10 minutes to, if you'd like to shake Dr. Paul's hand or get a signature. And then Dr. Paul has to get to a book signing downstairs, and then he's got a flight.
I have